So you were going to educate us on how they do parent-teacher conferences down under.
Well,
Keep going.
well, each school is different, and my kids all went to very different schools. But one of them had 5 minute slots every 10 minutes, so you would literally and they put all the teachers in a big gymnasium with desk, and so you would just kind of it was madness because it was so loud. But you'd sit there and hover over the person in front of you, waiting for them to finish, so you could get your 5 minutes in to talk to your teacher. And it was I don't miss that. Not a lot of high quality content, loud.
Well, maybe you can give it. So I was just signing up for the parent teacher. So there was two options, right? There was the round robin option. That's what I wanted. The 1 hour, but it's like really just 10-minute slots to rotate. Because I felt like that was better. Let me just get in and do that. But then there is a separate, like if you just want one-on-one, like 15-minute slots, but then you got to go and you kind of prioritize either that or you're going to get stuck with somebody can meet at 1, but then somebody can meet at 3, and then maybe they'll do online for those, which is a whole nother dynamic. Maybe, can you get your partner on, your spouse, and then, the teacher on. So I don't know. I'm going to try for this first one. This is this is the middle school year. So I'm going to try for the first round robin, and I'll report back whether or not it was good or bad. So Cote, you must have given this a lot of thought. I can tell you're all over your children's schooling. What do they do in the Netherlands? I bet you it's a very laid back approach. Although you're going to an American school, right?
Well, we got the international baccalaureate school like yours.
IB. So then you're gonna see you and I. We can probably trade a little bit. So you're into this MYP kind of stuff too. Like you're getting that as well. So
maybe you can provide me a chart because I get mixed up about group whatever and NYP and all this business.
Yeah, your oldest is definitely an MYP. Your middle, I believe, is PYP, and your youngest is a toddler.
She's in diapers.
So she is. If anything, she would be in potentially Montessori. I don't know. There must be some other genre of learning in that.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot of meetings. Meetings here, meetings there, and then of course there's just I'm no Welsh systems person, but I understand that there's systems involved in everything, and you got to think about the systems, not the poor people trapped in them. But my first reaction to all of this is I don't think I could even decide where to go to lunch in 15 minutes, let alone discuss someone's education with the education professional. And 5 minutes, that's it's going to take longer to tell someone how to pronounce my name than 5 minutes. It really
I said 5 minutes. It was probably 10.
Anyway, but and to that point, we often will have, and also my wife does a lot more meetings than I do because I'm always recording podcasts and things like that. But we'll have these 15-minute meetings scheduled, and they always go to 40 minutes.
Really? You don't have they keep it on time
some
because there's people coming in no,
and they're always late to the meeting, so it's just it's just like a corporate meeting. It's we all know it's going to happen. What's going on here? Let's just every and again, I don't want to say anything bad about all the people involved on both sides, but it's there probably should be an hour or two every day just scheduled for meetings. That's just the way life is, right? That's the way we do stuff in the corporate world. That's what you got to do. These are the numbers. It's how they work out. Or you could have emails. I don't know. I'm sure everyone's overrun.
The next topic that I'm interested in your taking. So, in the vein of this meeting could have been an email, right? So because my son just transitioned to middle school, so maybe you're in the middle of this, Cote, and Matt, you've already passed this. It's once we got into the system of elementary, it did get very once we'd gone through it a couple times, we knew exactly what was going on. So they would send kind of the written, report card, right? And then we kind of got to the point of if everything's good on the report card, there isn't really a need, or it's you just do real quick 10-minute online meeting that's super quick, right? It's things are well. In fact, that's just more almost I don't want to say socializing, but it's more just
you
saying
still feel
hi to
obligated
the teacher.
to do it. Yeah,
but it's quick. It's real quick,
right.
And if you had to miss it, it wasn't you went out of your way to no one was oh, we got to have this. It was just hey, you can't make it, no problem. But now because we switched, right, I feel obligated for like the first one to like try to get in there. But I was thinking to myself, like, maybe I'm just making the mistake. Like, no, like kids get educated. My wife, who works in education, tells me this all the time, is like, if there is a problem or something you need to know about, they're going to contact you. Like, if you don't hear, like, this is the truest form of like school. It's like, if you're not hearing anything, things are going fine. That's her general kind of like attitude. It's like, you know, everything's fine. And if you're needed, if something is not, you are very likely going to hear about it. So that's just back a long way back to the question of like, well, maybe I should just read the report card and be like, okay, things are fine.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, much like in getting good at software, what I am interested, I think the flaw with the, you know, my therapist told me the advice that like no feedback is good feedback. And I think I try to live my life, my work life by that dictum there. And however, I think that in schooling, my experience has been that late feedback is bad feedback. Like you got to get the feedback like in time to like catch anything happening. And you don't want to be like, oh, so the last 4 months. Okay, well, the future, right? Like, like you want to know. Like,
that's why the meeting. I mean, I guess if there's an argument for like the one-on-one with your manager or the one-on-one with the school, it's all the kind of same. It's sort of like it kind of does force you to at least have the conversation or think about, is there anything that I would like this person to know, right? Whereas like if it's not a major thing, right, then that would be the opposite of what I was saying before. It's like, well, you're only going to hear about the major stuff, but if you're never there. Yeah. And maybe there is something kind of slowly building up that if you did kind of know about it, like, oh, like so-and-so's kind of late on the homework, or like, or your boss would tell you, it's like, I really appreciate if you did this a little bit more. And they're not like, it's not, it's like, because you're in the room, they're telling you versus like, it's something they had to tell you. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, and I'm trying to put this in the most, optimistic or way possible, because again, it's just a system with people involved, but it's just like the corporate world. You're just like, could we just agree on like one calendaring system and one method across all these meetings to like, it's just like every single work item in life from Montessori to like your funeral has a date, things that must be delivered by that date, who is responsible for it, and fourth, a status on any given day. And just like, we should have that. Just like, and just regularize it like across the whole thing, right? The problem, and let me switch to corporate life, but it's representative of education life. The problem you have in corporate life as agile software development and all this stuff, maybe even platform engineering, which I'm not an expert in, go over, is when you have variation, when you have all these different groups or silos, as we say, that follow their own governance, their own norms, their own ways of doing things. They follow different calendar things. You got a Confluence over here. You got a Backstage over here. Over here, you got some person with like markdown files and a directory using Git over here. You got a Perforce there, mainframe. But if we let's just all use the same calendaring system. Let's do that first. Now we have dates. We all live in the current universe as far as we know. If you are not living in the current universe and you haven't told us, this doesn't, you're ruining it for everyone.
Right.
And so like, we all know that there will be dates that something must be done by. So let's use dates. And then maybe, I don't know. I don't care if it's in a markdown file, if it needs to be a CR in Kubernetes so it loads up in Backstage, whatever. Let's just all use the same thing, right? As opposed to a whole bunch of different systems. Some of them are, a Google Cloud system. Some are some strange thing I've never heard of before. Like, and then you got to sometimes it's an email. Sometimes there's a Post-it note that fell off of someone's, head biking on the way home. Who knows? But I think kind of in a corporate life, as in probably other big systems, if we all just use the same thing and recognize the 4 primary items of work items, there's a date, there's things that need to be done by that date, there's a person or people responsible by it, and there's a current status. I think all I'm saying is information radiator. Go to this. The C2 wiki. Look it up.
Well, I mean, I'm sure like those be an upcoming topic. Maybe we won't get it to today. Like, well, Zoom's going to fix all of this with Zoom Mail and Zoom Calendar. So,
Zmail.
his email, which of course reminds me of Zimbra, which of course we all.
Oh, I was trying to remember that. Yes.
Matt and I believe Matt and I use Zimbra.
You must have. Yeah.
At
You
one
know, we
point.
use that.
Was it? Did we use
Yeah,
Outlook
probably.
or Zimbra? I think at one point we used it and it sucked. I didn't like it.
We use that for what's the saying? Hot minute
VMware
at
buy
Red
them?
Monk. I think they
Did
did.
VMware buy Simra?
Or was it Sun?
Let's see here. No, not Sun. Sun had its own crappy systems as well. So,
I heard someone going over in the Merlin Mann universe of podcasts, the one he does with John Syracuse. John Syracuse was telling him about
Rec
Lotus
devs.
Notes. Yeah,
Is
he
that
was
what
telling
it
about
is?
Lotus Notes the other day, and it was amazing. It's like there's that little collection of podcast hosts who've never had like a big large organization enterprise job, and then whenever the other one is Marco Arment when he just will like talks about some enterprise tool, like why would you ever need this? And then when they just stumble into like the enterprise shit pile, it's just hilarious. it's kind of like like
Okay,
in UA,
this is a quick diversion because I don't want to get off this tangent. I don't know how many tangents we're in. I want to go to one
Okay.
more level deep. Okay, Marco Arment, I know what you're saying, but like Marco, I totally get like what he does and how he's made money. Right, he has stint at Timblr, made a lot of money. What we're gonna mention it later today because it came up in the Slack. He makes Overcast. He of course makes
Very
the podcast.
corporate. Very enterprise.
ATP. But I'm just saying, like, I know where his money, like, I know how he's accumulated wealth. And I know, even though he doesn't really talk about it, like, he has spent some time in corporate America, right? Like, it's been a while, but it's there. Okay. So I'm using him to contrast him with Merlin Mann, who I believe has just been podcasting and talking about productivity his entire life. Like, he's actually, like, I feel like a prerequisite for Merlin Mann is like, yeah, I did 15 years in corporate and now I've got the stuff. But like, from what I can tell, he's like, no, he's just like, he's immediately pundit. Like he never had, like, I feel like you have to earn your punditry, which is a funny statement to say, but like, did I miss it? Like, what did Merlin Mann do? What has he actually done to have this wisdom of productivity?
He did a lot of project management stuff. As I recall.
All right. So that's the part I did not understand then.
No. It's fine. It's more of like, yeah, just like it's hilarious to see someone try to explain Lotus Notes to someone because like really what you want to be like, what did he say? I remember it was, they were talking about how there's all what do they call them? PKMs. We always have these systems and nowadays it's all like the markdown in flat files crew who's like doing this with, it's called Obsidian, not Oblivion. That's what they should call it. But like there's, you got Obsidian and all these other note-taking things, which I've chronicled over the years, I guess. And the funny comment was just like, oh yeah, Lotus Notes was doing that, but and it did all of that. It just did it all in the worst way possible. And I think it's just Lotus Notes. I hear it was great though.
Good.
I think it's just timing. Like I think if you used it at the beginning, it was awesome. I think
it just ran out.
Yeah, if you used it post Exchange, Outlet, Google Mail, you're like, what happened? Like I'm in a time machine. Like it just like I can't get out of the past.
That would be
that's all it is.
That would be a good. I'm always coming up with this. A good study. That might because you need 3 case studies to kind of explore like a theory, and the theory being that like just software expires. And like kind of like figuring out why it expires. Like you just can't evolve it. It doesn't.
Do we need to make that a theory? Can we just immediately make that a law? Like I feel like we have enough prior evidence. Like, do we need to go through the scientific method?
Well,
like, I feel like
I guess
Crack for Legacy Conf.
I think
I'm gonna go so
software
far as to be like that is like the sun will come up and software expires. Like it's
Okay,
on
okay,
the
okay.
same level of
it's
to
not
me.
and by theory what I mean is like a model, like a way of modeling it so you can start to like predict and call things, right? Like it's because at some point at some point you need to be like
where we at? Like, that would be
yeah.
good. You could look up,
Yeah.
hey, like run the model, see where we at on the software. Right?
Yeah, you got to be like this.
now we're talking.
This has got 3 to 5 years left before it just completely is no good. So we need to make a choice now, right? Like, do
that would
we?
be absolutely fantastic. I mean,
I feel like when I don't know, but this would be possibly an illustrative. I don't know. It's probably both. Example is like. When I used I don't even remember what it was called now, but whatever that Outlook company is that email company that they bought that Javier Soltero came in from, right? Like I used that email client before they bought it, and then when they brought it in, like that's what they used for the Outlook client, right? So at some point They had like an Outlook email client, and they were just like, oh, we ran the model and it's done, so we better get a new one. They
I
just
like it.
it's
No, I like
toast.
it. Well, that's like I'm using what Mimes. I think it's called MimeStream. I like it. It's like the latest email client like that. I'm sure that will eventually be
Killed by
you know
Google.
killed or bought by Google. But right now, I'm like, oh, I really like it. Yeah, I think it's good. So
Classic.
All
okay,
right.
yeah. Just follow up on the follow up.
Good pre-show.
Yeah, one Zimbra was bought by VMware. So
Okay. Huh.
and then
Not to go look that up.
and then what does he say here? Javier.
Now they're owned by Cinecore.
Okay, then does a
Whoa.
comply? A comply?
A Comply. Yeah, I would say a Comply,
Yep.
but
Okay,
like
well, that
accomplishment.
was the name of Javier's company. That was
It was a great email client.
email
Like,
startup he led was acquired in 2014. Wow, since then.
yeah. I mean,
Okay,
I
so
think
the rebranding of the Comply apps for iOS and Android as Outlook. So that is so if you're using Outlook on your phone, I
yeah,
believe
it's
you're
that app.
probably using that.
Okay, according to Wikipedia, VMware sold Zimbra. They bought it in 2010, sold it in 2013
Oh,
to
my data's-
Telligent, who changed their name to Zimbra, and then they got acquired in 2015 by Cinecore.
Wow.
The sordid
that
history.
was a whole life cycle there.
Yeah.
Nice.
Cinecore sounds like a rejected Blade Runner corporation name.
Well, I think it's more of like a statin drug or something. Ask your doctor if Cinecore's right for you.
Yeah. I think we talked about a conflict at the time. This podcast existed back then, right? I mean, I feel like it must have. And
Jeez.
but because they were a great example of one of our other, I don't know what to name it, one of our other principles is just like, yeah, just fucking work with Exchange. Why are you dicking around? Like, are you trying to help the world or make things worse?
Oh, that's perfect. All right. Well, to summarize the pre-show is go to your children's conferences. That's all. That's all we did today. Because that's, of course, what we were talking about.
and use
All right.
Zimbra.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. You
Brought to you by friends at Zimbra.
From Cinecore. Our belief is that robots should not look like humans, and then it's unambiguous. That's the Cinecore way.
But I do like your from Montessori to your funeral. That's go take that. You have a lot of good quotes. That's one of the best. Also, if you had to spell Montessori to get out of Montessori, I would still be in it. That was a very difficult word.
Ooh.
So took a lot of attempts to get that one right. All right, you ready, Kote? Are we good with these topics? Are we?
What are we talking about?
Yep. There we go.
Well, we got the
Need.
we got a little magic quadrant for cloud that we can go over.
Quadrant.
Yeah,
Finally, I can figure out who's in the lead.
we can talk about the Twitter stuff, of course. That's great. And then maybe we got a few minor items down here about Cisco buying people and whatever happened to the crypto exchange, which I don't really understand. But that's
Yeah,
fine.
that was probably boring. Then maybe we should do like our little wheelhouse. Like I don't know if you guys have been following the Taylor Swift.
Cisco buying stuff.
The Swifties trying to register
yes.
to buy tickets. That's kind of funny. I think. I don't know. That's just a fort. I just think I always like digital transformation in the real world. It's like, well, Taylor Swift didn't
How
work out
is
so well.
this not a fixed thing yet?
That's what I was gonna say. That's what's so great about it. It's like, no, the Swifties. It's like it doesn't matter. Like if someone walked, well, I guess we could talk about it on the show. Like I just think that would be like, hey, if someone walked in, like even I know if someone's like, hey, we're about to do this big ticket sale for Taylor Swift, I'd be like, oof, we need to spin up some like.
Have you talked to Elon Musk about how they're going to handle it?
I'd be like full speed ahead. We need everything. We need multi-cloud.
Yes.
We need Kubernetes. We need load balancers. We need serverless. Like man, the torpedoes, people. But
Bring it
evidently
all.
that didn't happen. So,
Bring in all the Kubernetes you can find.
just bring it in. Call everybody. Call everyone.
like in The Professional, where that guy is like, bring everyone.
We're about to see a denial of service attack masked as a ticket sale like we've never seen before. So, anyway.
Ironically, they might have to open a ticket to do that.
Better. All right. Well, hopefully some of those topics will be good.
All right.
All right.
Wow.
See, I just wanted us to hash that out.
All right. Whenever you're ready, Kate. No sponsors, so just go all the way through.
I've got to
No
come up with
Zumba?
something to talk about. We talked about so much already. You got that guy down there looking at me. All right. So tonight, I thought I'd spend some good father-son time. We walked around. Do they call it poke walking, where you walk around and you do your Pokemon stuff? Is that something your kids still do? Are they into the Pokemon?
No,
Not so much anymore.
Yeah, mine briefly played it. You like talking Pokemon Go and
Sure. Now, more importantly, the question I want to ask has to do with identity access and management, and that is so. Of course, like we don't really play Pokemon that often, and whenever I play it, like I have to log in, and I don't know what they're doing over there in the Pokemon Go Incorporated, but they've managed to somehow do a login on the iPhone that doesn't work with 1Password. I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
In fact, what it does is it opens up a UI. It opens up their login, and then there's a little box above the keyboard that you type your stuff in. So I'm not sure if they're just like using Flash or Air or something, or I don't know what's going on, but like it's bizarre, but that's fine. But then I noticed that you can do that. Now, would you call this a single sign-on? But you can do some kind of single sign-on with either Google, Facebook, or Apple. And so I looked up my password, which is easy to do because I use a password manager, and I put it in there, and I logged in, and then I was collecting the mimes and the Jigglypuffs or whatever is in there. They're always like, I think the way that you come up with the Pokemon character is you have a regular character from real life or mythology, and you're like, what if we just really gave it one fucked up feature, right? And then you got a Pokemon on your hands. And like, for example, there's a pelican, and then it's got these big, gigantic hands that look like, when Roger Rabbit went underneath a steamroller or something.
they've got like a Mr. Potato Head set, and they just like, okay, throw a pelican in there, shake out the contents of the box and see what lands.
Exactly.
It's got arms now.
I mean, I think they're using that AI stuff nowadays to come up with it. I wouldn't be surprised. That would be a good prompt, is to write in like, picture of next 500 Pokemon, and see what it comes out with. Anyways, so then I was playing it, and then I had a break where I'm sure I was supposed to be collecting some Pokeballs so my son could take them from me or whatever. But I decided what I'm going to do is I'm going to authenticate it with the Apple login. And of course, you got the option where you don't have to share your email address. And I've started doing this, I realized. It's just like, whenever I sign up for a new account, if it lets me use the Apple one, I'm just like, sure, whatever. And I just use that. And like, it's super easy. And like, is this a bad idea or a good idea? Am I going to get hacked? What's the story with this?
Well, my general rule is always do the email-based authentication, right? Because that way you own it. You own the password. You own the whole thing there. So it's like, because you just, probably Apple's the best, right? But ultimately, you're just introducing, they're going to be now in the middle of your authentication event. So if you in that site have a problem, right, they're just like, what I mean? You just kind of a whole nother party involved. And then, of course,
right,
while Apple, I think, is very trusted, you just don't know, right? You don't know exactly how they're managing that stuff.
You can revoke their access too, right?
You can. Yeah, no, but you just got to manage all that, right? You got to decide. Like, if you revoke the access, then like, do you have to create a new account? Can you recover your old account? Right? That whole thing becomes a whole process. And then, of course, like, you're already using a password manager, so I don't see the value. Like, it'd be different.
Oh, it's just it just removes one little step when you create an account, right? Like, so when you create it, like, I've got to, you got to have an email, and then like, I guess I've finally trusted that 1Password. I get confused about who's suggesting a new password to me, if it's like Apple or 1Password.
Oh, well, you got to turn off. You got to go one or the other and turn off the one that you're not using.
Okay,
like if you're
probably the Apple one, right?
Yeah,
you got to turn that off,
because then you're in some kind of password, genie.
It's
hell,
just very
right?
confusing.
And,
yes.
Turn off the Apple one. Say never. You can go into settings, preferences rather, and just say no, never offer passwords.
Okay. Yeah, okay. And then that would more or less solve the problem. And then it's just this one app, this Pokemon Go app, that doesn't really respect the way that computers work.
Nobody's ever said that about Nintendo.
But you run into, like, I'm always amazed. You'll run into sites where they clearly have gone out of their way to prevent a password manager from working in the name of
Yes.
security, like cut and paste passwords and things like that. And it's just like, I don't know. I almost feel like there should be like another option of like, listen, let me prove to you I'm good with passwords, and like I want you to get out of the way, right? Like, you know,
Yes.
I'm not you're making it more difficult for me, and I'm trying to use a good password, but I don't know.
Yeah.
And maybe
This is the worst.
hopefully passkeys, right, will eventually alleviate all of
So
this for
so
us.
so I mean, a passkey, is that just Apple saying, you know, they're managing the relationship for you? How is that different?
Well, this is the whole, I mean, this is all, it's the, you know, it's Apple, it's basically all the major browsers essentially supporting it, right? So saying that like, yeah, so eventually you're going to basically get a token, right? Generated, and it has to be saved somewhere. So you have to decide where you're going to save it. But ultimately all the browsers will support it. So now you're going to get out of the habit of having to like even know, right? It'll just sort of like
I
happen
see.
for you.
Okay.
So, but of course, like everybody, like I guess I'm on the latest version of Mac OS, so it's just I don't know. We're still at the beginnings of like, is it gonna work, right? I mean, I've been on it, and I know Passkeys is out there, but I haven't moved anything over yet. So we'll see. I don't know. We'll just have to see if it works.
I still
right?
haven't
I mean,
moved my family to password managers yet. So
well, maybe if you wait long enough, maybe you just go forget about it and just go to Passkeys. Like try to get them all on Passkeys.
exactly.
Now, let me. I like to check in this every now and then, but the reason to use one password instead of the Apple keychain. Well, one, because the Apple keychain's all on Apple, right? Like
Right.
which is for me a moot point. Like I don't doesn't matter, right? Like, but
You're all about the default lifestyle.
that's right. But the other thing is, I believe in the Apple keychain, it like only stores credentials. You can't just store like other stuff. Like, you know,
True,
I've
that's
got
true, yeah.
like credit cards. I don't know if this is a infosec problem here, but you
I
know,
think they're in there.
I'll store like credit cards, passports, all that kind of shit in there, so that you know when I need to use
That's
it.
all in your digital wallet.
But is that in? Well, that's not in the Apple keychain thing, right? Only one
They
password.
got to be
supports
related,
that.
right?
I don't think
It
so.
seems like it's part of your Apple account. I don't know.
No,
pull up
no.
my-
I think in
digital
case
wallet
of
and-
Apple, I think what you end up with is passwords, and I think what you're saying is right. Mostly it's passwords in like SSH keys and stuff in the keychain, right? But then Apple does
Right.
offer other ways, like you know your wallet to store other information like credit cards, right? So it's like that would
Yeah,
be
that's true. So you could do the
So-
credit cards, but then
Yeah.
I guess you could also use like secure notes to store all
Right.
this other stuff. But it's just kind of it's nice that it's built into like one password. Like for example, if you have an address in there, you can go into one password and you click on it, and it's like copy zip code,
Yeah.
copy address too. Like it's
Ooh,
very
wait. So one password's gotten into contact management too.
oh, it's got everything, man. It's great. Like
Are
it's
they
got
doing calendar?
social security numbers.
Well, and also
yeah.
too, like you say, like you know, I mean, not that this is necessarily top of mind, but like you know, like we software defined talk, of course, like we share some passwords, and it's nice because it's all in one password. It makes it easy. That's another feature Apple doesn't have yet. So
Oh yeah,
So
we'd
it's
have to
like
be in the
we-
same family.
right, and it's like that's all you know. That's a non-starter. I don't think we definitely don't want to commingle the families. That would be the end of software defined talk. It would it would end
You know, Kim already gets bugged out that when we log into our bank account, we see the software defined talk one. So that's, you know, always an issue. Well, you know, so you kind of alluded to this, Matt Ray. I just want to mention briefly that there's a new white knight on the playing field of collaboration, email, and calendaring, and that is Zoom. They're coming out with Zmail, which I don't think anyone should confuse with Zmodem, which I think was the best way to transfer files. But Zmail maybe uses the Zmodem protocol. Was that a protocol, or was that what were those things called? Schemes.
I think it was a protocol.
A protocol. Yeah, okay, good. So, like, I haven't really dug into this, nor have I been offered a pre-briefing. But I think it kind of goes without saying that if anyone out there wants to try to solve email and calendaring, I welcome their efforts. They should just go for it and see what they come up with, especially calendaring. And I think, you know, there's a good, I can see the strategy meetings now, right? Like you've got a great attach plan. Like basically anyone who's using Zoom is probably coming directly from a calendar invite or an email. Not, you know, most of the people are probably doing it. So I don't know. It's this could work out
Synergies.
great. We'll
All
see what
coming
happens.
together.
Yeah. Now that said, I think it does remind me of sort of weird efforts or efforts that went weird in the past. Like I still am mildly shocked, or not shocked is the weird reason, but I'm still like just befuddled that like that whole video conferencing thing in Slack didn't work out. Like it just seems like it seems like a natural thing, and it's still there. It seems like a natural thing that you would do. Is like it's just like, why not click here and start having a video call instead? And I don't know, maybe it's because people don't want to have video calls. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I think the company was Screen Hero, I think, and Zoom bought them and like sat on it for like a year, and then they slowly rolled out it into their apps. And it's like, I've used it once or twice inside of Zoom, but it's like, I mean, inside of Slack, but Zoom is just better integrated into Slack. It's.
Well, someone on the chat's pointing out here that one of the limitations on the Slack side is just like, if not everyone's in the Slack that you want on the video, then you can't invite them, right?
Well, that too.
It's not easy. So you kind of default back to like if most of your meetings are going to be in Zoom or Teams or something else, you probably continue to use that versus like, this group I meet with in Slack and this group I meet with in whatever.
I think, I think maybe you're hitting on something is like in this space. Maybe there's a theory or model, so to speak, here as well. In this space, most of what you're doing is pretty much like commodity. So it's all about like ease of use and defaults and doing stuff, right? Like I almost feel there was some point in the past couple of years where like every time I created a meeting, it would try to insert like a Teams meeting in there. And like I had to actively fight my email client to like remove that and have it not do that. And like, if I could not have removed that, I bet the whole company would just be using Teams because they would just be like, I don't know, I got other shit to do, right? And like, so which is to say, like in Slack, if it really, I guess it is pretty easy to be like, /Zoom me or something. I forget what the command is. And so maybe if there was some button that was like, the meeting button, and it would like create a brand new channel, invite people to it, set up a call. And like within like 20 seconds, you could have a whole thing going. Then maybe that would be nice. But instead, it seems like it's not that kind of workflow is not involved there. I think once again, armchair strategist, we've solved the problem, fellas.
Well done.
Well, speaking of armchair strategy, first of all, if there's people working on their cloud strategy out there, there's a new Magic Quadrant out. And as always, especially with this one, since there's only like 7 people in it, I think the 3 people who are in the leader quadrant, you can go get the report for free if you legion themselves from it. I got it thanks to Google. I don't remember why, but I read through it, and it looks like I went through at some point, and I know you're not supposed to do this, but I drew a line from a mental line, not a real line, from the lower left to the upper right. And I kind of eyeballed the ranking, and the ranking is pretty much what you would expect. It's a big shocker there. Now, I think there was some commentary in there, but I think the part that stood out to me most, that was most interesting, because we're always wondering what's the deal with Google Cloud, right? Like it's Google, so what's going on here? And I think there was like a little bit of like commentary from the Gartner people about how there might be some some goofiness going on in Google Cloud. But then if you read the rest of their comments, they're basically like they've long had their act together. Things are looking good. So
well, they got to nitpick at something, right?
Yeah, exactly. You always that is
like, we must have an excuse for why they can't move out a third.
That would be pretty awesome if you started seeing in analyst reports, especially Magic Quadrants. It would be like, they would. Do they do a SWOT in a? They don't do a SWOT in a Magic Quadrant,
No.
Right, Brandon? Like,
No.
yeah. So let's just say goods and bads, and the bad was just like none. Next one.
We have no excuse for why they're not excelling.
Well, I think the
Brought to you by
bad, it's kind of
Thomas
interesting. Like the bads they called out, except for the Google one was odd. The bad for the AWS is just, again, it's just the classic, take the strength, make it a weakness. The strength is that AWS is the leader. They are the least incentivized to like worry about multi-cloud. So therefore, flip it around and be like, well, their weakness is they're not focused in on multi-cloud, and they have, despite the quote unquote customers wanting it. And it's like, yeah, totally makes sense. And it's like very predictable. The strategic confusion, I think you could apply that to Google in the sense of, and I think they kind of did this when they called out financial losses, right? That was the one for GCP that made sense. And it was like, the comment was, quote, despite its revenue gains, GCP is the only SIPS provider with significant market share that continues to currently operate at a large financial loss. And then they go on to say that, with Google's advertising margin, that's definitely a weakness. And okay, that makes sense to me, right? That's sort of like, okay, I get it. We all knew that, but like you're stating it. But the strategic confusion was like, I don't know. I think they wanted to say something like, is Google committed to this? And I think they kind of say that with financial loss. And I think they just kind of got lost. The person writing this was like, let me write something about their enablement programs for migration, which I'm actually somewhat familiar with. I was like, this isn't like, that is not a problem. We know what the programs are. Like, that's not like, I don't know. That doesn't seem to rank high on my list at all. Right. I was like, but the financial losses I kind of get. And then of course, Microsoft is sort of, what did they say there? They said, they kind of, if you will, I guess the other thing they do, they give credit to AWS for being so clear with its financials, and they kind of ding everybody else for like hiding revenue with other things. And that's across the board. So I thought that was nice. I was like, yeah, good job, Gardner. Keep saying that. See if they'll get it. And then, and I think, I don't know, I guess, Microsoft in a lot of ways kind of came at it with the most generic. I didn't really leave their, I guess their strength was hybrid multi-cloud, but I didn't leave the report with any, major like weakness. I don't know. Did you see anything, Cote?
No. I think that was the whole thing is that Microsoft's like the target of cloud. And it's just like,
and I guess maybe the biggest takeaway, you were just like, say one thing in the report is like, Oracle is really the only one that's moved. Like Oracle has moved over the last several years, and they're kind of in the, the lower quadrant there, challenger, right? So I guess if you're going forward, the question would be, does Oracle ever get big enough to get on par with GCP? Would be the next, kind of like next one up to kind of like take out, right? I guess if like this was a Formula One race, we'd be like, they're battling in the midfield. Can Oracle displace, GCP in the top three? And I guess that will be the question going forward. Other than that, it seems like AWS and Azure, barring something unforeseen, it feels like they're going to be solidified as 1-2 for a while.
Is there like, is there a reason for Oracle to care so much about like infrastructure cloud?
Well, a lot of their business is SaaS, and
right, exactly. So that's cool.
And there's money to be made. If they're not there, someone else will come there and displace their SaaSes.
Well, I think it's revenue growth, right? It's as simple as that. Yeah. Like they know, like they look at AWS at like what 88 billion, and they just like, if nothing else, they don't want to be left behind.
Well, there's that, but like, so with the SaaS stuff, right? I mean, it's like it's obviously they should care about like SaaS, but that's why I was saying infrastructure is just like, so you could say like, well, okay, you got to protect your Solaris revenue, and like, I don't know, do you? I mean, no. and you could say like, well, you got to protect your middleware and your database revenue. It's like, well, sure, but like, why don't you just like partner and run that on cloud? Because I think like all those other people make tons of money. So you can you could have a partnering relationship to like move that stuff over here versus
but once your IaaS is over there, you can start. It's easier to displace Oracle on AWS with RDS than it is if the public cloud. If you're already over on Oracle Cloud, you're like, hey, I'm gonna, you're not gonna switch to RDS. If you're on Oracle Cloud.
Right. So basically, if you're going to, you could either say protect or ensure the best possible technology. For
potato, right?
For middleware and database and stuff. That means you also need to have some kind of infrastructure thing so that you can kind of keep people in the community that you've built.
It's a new moat. Yeah.
But
also, I mean, it's the part like I guess like it's probably the boring part of this report, but I think it's probably maybe the financially it's the thing that's most important is like. The money is still in, compute, storage, networking, and databases. So it's like, if you want part of that 88 billion that AWS is making, you better have an infrastructure as a service, solid set of offerings. And like, yes, everyone will talk about SaaS. Everyone will talk about all the services on top, but the money today, right? If you want that, go get that money, you have to have a strong offering there. And so I think Oracle sees that, and I think they have invested a lot. And then that's sort of kind of what, IBM kind of, remains kind of in the worst quadrant. And it's like, that's kind of what
the doldrums quadrant.
It's like, yeah, they're just basically saying, you know, IBM hasn't made that commitment, right? IBM isn't going to get it. I mean, at this point,
Yeah.
it seems like IBM's kind of,
Well, what is
to your
IBM's
point, they've kind of done what you said, Cote. I think they've gotten away from that. They're like, we're not going to play in this infrastructure as a service. We have it, but like we're not as focused in on it.
Yeah, I mean, IBM isn't. They don't have, for whatever reason, they don't consider it. They don't act like they consider it existential. I mean, Oracle, you can see like they have to protect their SaaSes. You know, they have to protect that money stream, and the smaller cloud players, you know, your DigitalOceans and like, they can do the IaaS stuff more efficiently or, you know, better, whatever. And software just kind of sits there without like really inspiring much. It needs to be tied to something that, you know, is core to IBM. What's core
Yeah,
to
and I
IBM?
think the quote here is perfect. It just says it, just what you're saying there. IBM Cloud has not yet found its competitive identity when compared with other providers in the
There you
market.
go.
For SIPs. And it's like, Matt, you should just write these reports.
I should write for
That was it.
Gartner.
And, I mean, that was, you know, that was essentially, and it's like, yeah. But I do think there's something about you only get so many shots at these things. Like we forget about all the people. Like there's only 9 vendors in this. Remember when this thing first came out? There was like 38
20.
people in this
Yeah.
thing. It was like you needed a magnifying glass to read it. Now it's like we're down to 9, and it's like think about all the companies that have left. And you know, I don't know what will happen with
Virtue
the ones
Stream.
with the niche players, right? I mean, either they stay niche or they kind of fade away. Like I don't know,
Yeah.
are any of them like really doubling down? Or is Tencent, IBM like? Do you think they're going to make a big move up? Seems unlikely at this point. Like Oracle seems like the one that's coming, right? If anyone's going to do it, they are.
Well,
We'll see how committed they are too.
They seem to have the most fire under them. You know, that it's make or break them.
Now
I
you're
mean,
reminding
other people seem to
me.
have given up. Yeah.
Didn't Gartner like 4 or 5 years ago like shut down this Magic Quadrant?
I renamed it. I think it was IaaS
Because
only.
I thought
And
I
then,
remember Lydia Leung being like, "Yeah, we're done. You can turn off the lights."
But this
you know.
one's got to be so popular. I bet you they struggle. They're probably like, this is probably one they should stop because it's only 9 vendors and we all know the rankings. Like we could just name it without seeing it. But like, you got to think this is one of their top reports that people look at, and also one of the reports that is licensed the most by the vendors, right? I mean,
Yeah,
like you're selling this to AWS, Microsoft, and Google every year. Like if you're the Gartner salesman, you're like, yep, I'm going to get 3 people to license this, and they're the 3 largest companies in the world, and they're going to pay for it.
Yeah,
So like,
they're just like,
the salesperson at Gartner does not want this report to leave.
No, they just go to all these events and they're like, "Who wants sushi? I'm buying." And,
Yeah,
and
that's
there you
right.
go. All right. Well, you know, I think maybe so. You know, we listed those cloud providers that are kind of lower down there. I think one way that they might be able to lift up their revenues is they should go after that Twitter account. Because I think there's a lot of changes and replatforming going there now. It might be good that Google has 2 ways of modernizing applications. They could bring that in there. But I think they're looking over there in Twitterland. They're looking at a reverse microservice strangle at last I checked. So
They're going back to the monolith. They're getting rid of the microservices. They're just
Who
like
knows what
roll it
they're
all into
going
one
for?
big old app.
I mean, I think the favorite. It's very entertaining. And as someone who's, you know, as anyone who's been around like enterprise software and you know, SRE stuff and all that, just because every day you're like, what craziness are they going to, you know, is going to happen? I mean, this whole microservices thing. The best thing I saw yesterday was, you know, someone betting that they could get Elon to try to fire somebody off of Twitter who claimed to be a Twitter employee. It's like, hey, have you thought about?
He like looks them up and then he can't find them in the Slack.
Yeah, he's like,
"Oh,
I'd fire you,
sorry.
but you don't work for
Yeah,
me.
You don't work here. You're just and so he just kicks them off Twitter or blocks their Twitter account instead.
Probably. I mean, it's just randomly blocking people, just, you know, deleting tweets. It's like, what is going on over there?
Now, my question about this whole thing, though, like if Silicon Valley is like the comedy version of it, you know, on HBO, it's the kind of like what goes on in Silicon Valley, but it's funny because it's like edges up so much to the truth. I kind of feel like this is the horror movie, but like it's interesting because
it's funny,
while it's
though.
very extreme, like you recognize a lot of this behavior. Like you don't necessarily see it out in the open on Twitter, but you see it. Like there are 1 million people in corporate Slacks right now where like, yeah, an executive has just immediately gone down a rat hole. They're like, what's going on with this? Like, I don't understand.
How come we're not using
right?
this library to parse?
Like,
parse
I just was
JSON?
reading
And you're like,
such and such. And, you know, I mean, like that happens. Like everybody who's worked in tech has had like somebody enter the chat and be like, I'm starting a day 1 computer science level 1. I'm going to do no research. I'm going to have no one explain to me what's going on. And I'm just going to start firing off messages. And they would say, because I'm trying to get the team motivated, that is just going to distract everyone for like the next 3 days, right? It's going to add no value, but it feels relatable to me, right? I guess that's the whole point. It was like, it's like, now of course he's the richest person in the world. He's doing it on Twitter. He's even extra mean, I think, in a lot of ways. But I was like, kind of jives with like what I see a lot. So I was like, I don't know. Part of me was just like, this is interesting. It's like we're kind of like it's kind of spilling out into the mainstream. It's like all this, because like there's all these TikToks of like a day in the life of a tech person, and they're like sleeping in, and they're just like whatever goofing off. I'm like, well, there's this other side, right? The dark side that kind of looks like this. And so I don't know, Cote, like, is that a bad take on it?
No, I think that's accurate. I mean, I think it's perhaps the first large scale public example of that left column in the Westerum thing, the pathological column. And so finally, there's a good case study that you can go through here.
Well, because usually it's been tied up in the business world, and it doesn't touch consumers as much, right? Usually we're like, oh, did you hear what Jack Welch said, or Jared Diamond, or whatever. And instead here it's like, well, a lot of consumers are touching this, and they're learning about concepts like SREs and
and also like usually things are so minor that no one even cares enough to see someone do something in public at a regular company. Right? Yeah. Whereas in this case, it is much more interesting. And
don't you think Twitter, the person that I fired on Twitter, I was like, that's like the person in the all hands who like gets up, raises their hand, and like goes at it. Be like, I think this corporate strategy is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. I don't know why we're doing it. And then like, this is like after the executive has said something like, hey, I want to hear what you think, bring it on. And it's like, you see that person do it. You're like, that's not going to end well. That person quietly leaves. But we just watched it on Twitter. It's like, yeah, you take on your boss on Twitter publicly. It's like, you can be right. You can be 100% right. And as long as that pays the bills or you have money saved, that's great, but it's going to end poorly. Like you are not, no company's going to tolerate that. So I was like, I was like, the whole microservice is fun to watch, because that person seemed like they totally did know what was going on. And another person that didn't work there was like, look, Elon, I'd open up the debugger in the browser. Chrome. You could just see the one call. It was like, that's trying to checkmate on the problem, but everyone's still getting fired. And sure enough, a few minutes later, I was like,
that was, and then so what was it that happened there? There was some note that there was thousands, was it 1,200 like RPC remote calls from a client back to the back end, and then someone came along and opened up Chrome Developer and was like, no, look, you can trace it here. There's one call, and because it does everything server side, which is fine, I guess.
Yeah, SR Elon doesn't do blameless postmortems.
That's kind of where that comes from. Like, this is kind of true. This is kind of the real, you know what I mean? It's like when people talk about like, oh, we should do blameless postmortems, and you go to the workshop and you're like, this doesn't feel like it really isn't the job. And it's like, yeah, here it is. Like, here it is out in the open, right? It's like, oh yeah, this is kind of what everybody, I'm not saying it's good by any means. Listen, I don't think anything, like, I can't imagine anyone, and this is the other thing, like, you always like hear the management best practices, like you go to the training or the workshop or your company's talking about like having good conversations with your managers, and like the richest man in the world is basically doing the 100% opposite of everything that has ever been taught ever. Right. And it's just like, so I don't know. There's always like this weird dichotomy of like, well, the people that are really, really successful, they don't really do any of the things that like you will often be taught, which is that's a weird thing.
That's one of the things I've been.
No lessons.
Yeah, there's a few things I've been thinking about, like more than just enjoying the shit show of this. And one of them you kind of touched on is that like it is. I think we talked about this last week, or I talked about it somewhere else. But like it is a good like ongoing real time like management theory, especially in the software world, sort of experiment going on, right? Like how many of is this just an exception that proves the rule sort of thing? Or like how many of these things just like are not as universal truths as possible in either direction, right? Like how it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Like, for example, I don't know, maybe it's okay to be a jerk. Like I hope not, but like, we could see what happens now.
Are
know,
there people who are learning lessons from this?
now
Like, or the wrong lessons?
and
I think there is. I think there's a whole like. Listen, I think in the executive ranks, like if you just said you're seeing a very extreme case, but this case that like, hey, the company isn't working hard enough, right? The problem is people don't take it seriously. They're not working harder. I need people to work harder. Like I feel like universally, if you polled a bunch of CEOs, they would all be like, yeah, that's the problem I have, right? And then to flip it around, because we're watching it unfold on Twitter, the employee side of it is like, well, like one, you just spent $44 billion on this and you care a lot. I am making a very nice 6-figure salary, but like the level of incentives here could not be further off. And then two, like, I think this is back to like the mission. It's like, you know, the idea of like, we all just need to work harder, but like on what and for like, what are we trying to do? Right. That's what you have to get right. And it's like, as you kind of see the rollout of all these features, like I'm sure a bunch of people are like, fine, I'll work really hard. I'll get it done. And like, as soon as it gets rolled out, you know, it's pulled back or it's causing all these problems. And I'm sure the people that did it were like, they're like, literally, I told you 5 minutes ago that we shouldn't do this. And this is the reason. And now you're making me pull back. And now you're making me work double amount of time. And then that starts to slowly erode, you know, the confidence of like the people working on this. Like, why should I spend like, you know, there was that one employee that was like sleeping at the office. And, you know, I think she wanted to do it, at least based on what she was saying there. But it's like, there's only so much. Like, are you going to sleep in the office for the next 3 weeks to push something out to only have it pulled back, you know, immediately, right? You know, that it runs out, I guess, is my point, right? It's like, so this idea, and if you don't have these things figured out and people just keep asking for more and more and more, right? You kind of see the other side of like, well, this is why I'm leaving work at a sane hour and I'm not turning on my phone till the next day because it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
So like the pull there.
So this is a good example of what I was getting at with that jerk thing. Like, I mean, obviously it's not okay to be a jerk, but like there's a calibration that I think, again, none of these things are universal, but it's just some model you can pull out of to have in your head of like, where is the line of where being to use the phrase hardcore is actually damaging. So for example, right, like as pointed out by other people, like there's all sorts of other layoffs of many more people at other tech companies that kind of like, you know, suck, but no one's like getting upset about it in the same way they are at Twitter, right? And then also there's people who like, there's advertisers who are pulling out from doing Twitter stuff. And so it's kind of like, well, obviously this line of like jerkitude has been long past. And so now the whole focus, I mean, I guess ironically, there's a, you know, that concept of you don't want to be the main character of the day on Twitter, right? Yeah. And so it's like,
Elon's like, I'm going to buy it and be the protagonist. Like,
and then that same, you know, the same thing as you were talking about, there's a certain amount of like, it's a big ball of different things, but it's kind of like trust and incentives that you have for people. And like, there's like this magic equilibrium of trust and incentives, where as an employer, you're basically profiting from your employees. I mean, that's the way the whole thing works, right?
Sure.
Like that your employees are creating more value than they're being paid. And in the case of tech companies, way more value than they're being compensated. And so like, as you're saying, Brandon, there's a certain point where you cross that and you're like, and the tech people are like, I was okay making these other people rich, but I don't want to make you rich. Right. And so it's kind of like, so how we need, you know, this will give us some interesting like modeling of thinking about like, so if you want to get, you know, 7,000 people to help make you and your buddies rich, like, how do you need to behave in order to do that? Which may be like a capitalist, managerial thing would be like, whoa, way to be cynical, Lennon,
no, but I think
or whatever. But like,
you got to come in, I think you have to come in and be like, okay, how do I, you know, galvanize all these people together? And I think there is a separate scenario, like long past. It's not like you could do it now, but like just watching what we're trying to do, I think you could have come in and like, you know, like the latest email came out today was something like, you know, essentially, I mean, it's kind of weird, but like, I get it. Elon basically saying, hey, the company's changing. I'm essentially asking everyone to opt in, right? You know, like I'm going to ask you all to work extremely hard. And I want you to be here because you want to do that. And if you don't, I'm going to give you 3 months of severance and you can move on. Right. And it looked like somebody else wrote the email, because at the end he was like, and thank you for your efforts. So it's like, if you roll back the clock and you just said to yourself, like to me, if you roll back the clock and you started this transition that way, is to say like I would, you could have an all hands that said something like Twitter. I've taken over Twitter. I believe passionate in it, but like financially, it's not in a good shape. We're going to have significant cutbacks. The first thing I want to do is I'm going to let you all decide who wants to be here. Right.
Right.
That's first. So that'd be first round. And the second round is like, after we get that, we're going to look at what, how we're staffed, and like, we're going to have to do some additional cuts. No one would like hearing that, but it would be like, understand. And then you could say, and then just to finish that thought, it's like, then you could say like, what am I going to ask you to do? And you would say something along this like, we need to maintain the advertising business, and simultaneously we need to build a subscription business that we're going to start taking Twitter Blue as it exists today, and we're going to start doing a lot of changes to that. And I'm going to try to get it to subscriptions to XYZ, right? And you just tell people at a broad level, that's what we're going to do. Who wants to be here? And then model the company that way. And then you start to lay out the plans for the subscription business. And you could push that team, because at that point, hopefully you have the people left that like, I came to push out a new feature in a Twitter Blue every single day, week, month until it gets there. And it's like, it could just be a more, rational approach. And I think back to like this idea of like, urgency and being a jerk. It's like, you could probably get more done that way than you could just be like, I fired half the company. We did this. We rolled it back. I mean, it doesn't work as well.
Yeah,
but Matt,
it went around it all backwards. I mean, Twitter was clearly built with a lot of people who kind of believed in the mission. If you had come in with the soft hand, you could have, hey, this is what needs to change. We're in this together. Instead, it was like, you people who have dedicated your lives to building this thing have done it all wrong. I know better, and just laid waste to everything that was their culture. And so what is left with is a skeleton, and skeletons don't have any internal organs, and they die.
Yeah.
Or they're dead.
All right, but this brings me to the next question then. It's
Thanks, Dr. Biology.
Brought to you by Dr. Oz. No longer.
So this brings like, I think it's almost an interesting way to have like an open source discussion, right? Because I feel like we've had this like never like with this kind of like craziness, but like there's been a lot of times on the show we've talked about a company that's making money around an open source project changes the licensing, right? And it creates a lot of, distrust in the community. So I feel like, okay, well, Twitter, it's like, we're almost like it's consumer, but it's kind of something similar. So the other thing that all of us could do is just be like, hey, it's time to move on. Like we now understand that like, we like the, whatever you want to call it, the community of Twitter. Like we like what we have here, but the stewardship is gone sideways. So that's kind of my question and I think the answer, like, I'm still betting on no, the status quo, like the company Twitter will still kind of like be the same. That's still my bet. But it did make me think of like, well, could a big community leave Twitter? And I guess the contenders I came up with were like one, Mastodon, right? Which pretty much has all of the functionality of Twitter, but has essentially, relatively few users. So there's nobody there, right? So you have a kind of a collective action. And of course, most people upon seeing it, especially people that are not in tech, will be immediately be like, it's totally confusing. I don't get it. And, like all the journalists that complain about Twitter would rather write a long article about how it's too hard to use than actually learn how to use it, right? So there's like no commitment to learn something new. So, but I'll put that on the list. And then you've got the other ones in here that I came up with is like Discord and Slack, right? They kind of have this community vibe, but they don't have this public square kind of thing. So could they build on some public square functionality, or WhatsApp, somebody else threw out there as having a ton of users, a lot of group chats, and potentially, obviously it's owned by Facebook. Could Facebook kind of backdoor its way into some type of community? So I don't know. Do any of those even seem remotely viable alternatives to Twitter, or do you have something else in mind?
Well, I think the what do we call this scenario? I was going to say best case scenario. Well, okay. Well, the best case scenario is that like no one has to do anything. That's always that's
the best case scenario.
Right.
We will endure pain, and those that don't like Twitter will complain about it on Twitter, which is ironic in itself.
It's Cote's best case scenario of energy conservation is and relaxation, and so there's that. But it seems like for our world, like so I haven't used Mastodon for a while until recently, and like. I think I haven't done the analysis, but I feel like I get kind of the same what would you call it? Let's just say benefit. That's the wrong word, but I get kind of the same good feeling that something is worthwhile from both channels at the moment. Now, Twitter's a little bit more, but that's because I have like 11,700 followers versus 304 last I checked.
And you've invested in it in all these years.
Right.
Curated how you use it. I think
that's right.
Mastodon just doesn't have the curation.
However, like I feel so far, and like all the people that the interactions that I have in Mastodon are all with my target market,
Yes.
so to speak, right? And so the leads, and I'm putting this purposely in a goofy way, but the leads are good, right? And so like versus like, in Twitter, like there's some like Japanese fashion person that has Cote in their name, and every now and then I like hear about what they're doing. And there's like, some UK restaurant that has Cote in their name where people go have brunch. I've mentioned this before. Ooh. So they talk about how good it was, and I'm always like, wise choice, in reply. And so like it could be that while there is a lot more stuff in Twitter, it's sort of like, if you went to Times Square and you started talking about like, Elastic DB, it's not like you're going to make much money. Versus if you actually went to where your community was. And so I could totally see a scenario where, and again, I'll dip into the talking about all this, the old days, but like, that's how Twitter was in the old days. It was just a bunch of tech nerds.
It is how, and so in my Twitter usage, I use Tweetbot, which I have a ton of filters and mutes and stuff like that. So it cleans up the experience, and I get the, chronological timeline. So nobody's messing with, the order I see things. But I use 4 columns, and 2 of the columns I'm following like news items where, I don't have any relationship to this person. They don't follow me. I don't follow, I don't even follow them. I just have them in a news column. And like, all that news content is missing from Mastodon. Mastodon would just be the people
right.
who I'm following them, and
But I think
friends
this is
and
what you bring up with. I think is the collective action problem. It's sort of like if you took all the major news outlets. I mean everything. Everything. Everything that you think is reputable.
I get the news
Wall
from
Street
those news columns.
Yeah, I'm just saying like you could literally like they could have a call. The New York Times, the Washington Post, Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, like all of them, right? Could be like, hey. Because I think in a lot of ways, it's like, hey, we want to have more ownership over the content, how we spread it. Let's collectively, start moving to Mastodon. And also, too, in Mastodon, you can set up your own servers, right? So they could, if you will, almost by default, be like, okay, at Mastodon at NY Times, it's sort of like, it's like, okay, that's a valid. If you have that account, it's somebody from the New York Times or wherever. So like, you could have this collective view of like, okay. But someone has to decide. Everyone's like, let's start pushing
somebody
stuff here.
Somebody has to run. Hear me out. Right. Somebody has to run it, but there's also a moderation problem.
Right.
Mastodon doesn't have a moderation problem yet because they don't have, there's no audience to spam. Do we think that Mastodon as a service is going to be at reInvent?
But I'm just saying, but all the things you're kind of saying is like, well, I think the people that kind of like are incented to like the build, like kind of back to the Mastodon community, which I don't know that well, the people that built it, but I think, they could at least start coming up with solutions if they started to, aggregate a bigger audience. You know what I mean? It's like right now, it's like, you can't expect them to, and this is back to the collective action, chicken and egg kind of problem. It's like, well, you can't solve all the content moderation if you don't have any of the users, or vice versa. Like if the user, so I think that's kind of back to like, and so maybe that's why Mastodon is like, while it's functionally pretty complete, it's kind of dead in the water because it's like, well, you can't do it. So then you're back to just picking another aggregator, like who can maybe do a better job. And so, or Slack or WhatsApp or something else. Anything else. It's like, could you find someone to aggregate it better, or would they just be like, no, I don't want any part of this, this crazy show.
I think somebody will step in. I think somebody will step in and try to do commercial Mastodon and offer that as, we'll do verification. We'll do blue checks for Mastodon and run a
like
clean
Google
service
seems
for you.
to me like, I know Google is probably so scarred for their Google.
Nobody trusts Google.
Google Plus. What was the name of the
Google Plus.
Google Plus. It's like they're probably so scarred that they'll never want to make another 10. But like I was thinking to myself, well, wow, man, like, well, who would be good at running Mastodon? Like
Microsoft
Google, right?
could do it. They've got
any of them, I guess any, but Google just seems like they're really good at this, like at running this kind of stuff. And they seem like they do have the ability, the content moderation with like YouTube and like that.
And
It was
with
like,
Gmail,
what?
like they
Yeah.
can detect spam really well.
Yeah. So it's like, what if like the middle ground was like, they're not trying to build something new. They're like, we're just going to run this really well. And because I think that would have benefits for their search business. So I don't,
Yeah, or like
Oh.
Cloudflare or someone. They should do that. But I
Well,
mean,
yeah.
I think there's two things, and these things were like, well, one, our good friend over on the Cloudcast, Brian Gracely, had his Sunday thing. He didn't call it a Twitter eulogy, but it was a pretty good Twitter eulogy. And he raised up a good point that I've thought a lot about since then. I guess it's only Wednesday as we record this, but yeah, I mean, I think it's probably more or less the case that like the direction of our beloved DevOps community and cloud community and all this stuff was driven a lot by the ability of all these people to talk in Twitter. Like,
Absolutely.
I've heard the origin story of DevOps Days like 50 goddamn times. Like, so it's shocking I don't remember it, but I'm pretty sure Twitter's involved somewhere with, like talking about something. So there's that sort of thing of like, well, there's this actual utility function that this thing provides, in theory. Now, I think it still provides it today, right? In the tech world, in our little tech world here, right? And so if we narrow down to this, I think that our overall tech world, I mean, the people who talk about managing high scale services can probably run a high scale service on their own. So you almost have a did this happen in that Ayn Rand book, The Fountainhead? Like all the smart people run off and stand up their own
think that was-
mastodon. So, like, I think
the
that's
appendix of Atlas Shrugged, the chapter that.
Oh, it was Atlas Shrugged. No, Fountain.
John Galt.
Yeah. You're right. You're right.
That was on the cutting room floor. She was like, this last chapter doesn't really work.
Yeah, you're right. The Fountainhead's about that crazy ass architect or something. But anyways, I only know about this stuff because my girlfriend at the time was way into it. Not in a way nowadays that's creepy. She just, anyways, whatever. So you kind of see that already happening, the sort of Atlas Shrugged thing where all these tech people are moving. So like, we could probably generate that same thing without losing much. And then also, more importantly, get rid of all the normal people. Like, and just kind of like, so you don't need your tweetbot filters and you can filter all that junk out, right?
Right. But I think to a large extent, that's what I think Discord and Slack have, like, it's
Right,
not
right,
quite
right,
the
right.
same, but they've like all these public Slacks and Discords, like, if
Yeah,
you take the time
yeah.
to get into it, like you can usually find the community that you want.
I mean, I think that's that, to use a Ben Thompson word, right? Like one of the benefits of a Twitter, and if Mastodon was big enough, is just like discoverability. Just like, because you don't have to like go to a Discord thing. And there's so many Discord things I joined. I went and cleaned it out the other day, where they stick you in one of these like gatekeeping channels and you've got to like introduce yourself. And I'm like, I don't fucking know. My macaroni and cheese is burning. See you later. Right? Like, it's just like, I don't have time for that shit. Versus like, in other mediums where you don't have that gating, it's a little better. Now, the second thing I think is like a little like hoity toity or whatever, but like, to put it one way, like it's only been like a fortnight, like 2 weeks. And so that all this stuff has been happening more or less. And it's kind of like, it's like, I don't know, maybe we don't need to check in every day, even though we want to. and like, it might be fun to go read like The Economist each week, because it might be one of those times where The Economist is like, as we were going to press, a fifth thing had happened. So who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? 24 hours, like, but also they would be able to summarize what happened in the last week. Now, also what I'm getting at is just like, yeah, sure. I mean, if you try out 3 different things during the week, but no one checks in until the the retrospective at the end of the week, then whatever. Like, you just tried out a bunch of stuff, which leads kind of to like, like, I don't know if we need all this urgency, right? Like the idea that you would have all the news sites come over there and do this stuff is just like, there's like, it's probably, I don't think the right word is healthy, but it's just like, whatever. We could stand to lose that urgency. We could move to a week cycle. Not a big deal. Like,
Yeah.
and I think that also gets to the point that some people that I sort of agree with that some of the commentators say is that like, well, I don't quite understand this point, but it's that like no one would want to recreate Twitter, which maybe as a business, that's the case. And I guess there's the risk of like, getting like right-wing populist people like elected worldwide and all this other kind of stuff. So you've got like a societal risk that you're taking on. But I think more importantly, it's just like, I don't think anyone like really wants this. Like, you know, they might use it all the time, but like it's clear from the number of signups you have, like the business and how it runs, that like, yeah, people just want like Facebook. So they should do that. Like we don't need to.
Or maybe
like,
just
promote
like,
this
I
thing.
mean, the other way to think of it is just like we're seeing just like because of Elon taking it over, we're seeing this really accelerated version of like maybe moving away from it. But like most of the time, this is kind of why I'm back to like, you know, I would just bet on the status quo. And like what normally happens in these cases, it's like, it's not like someone buys it and like there's all this controversy. It's just like slowly people lose interest and it's replaced by something else. Like,
Right.
and think about like MySpace being replaced by Facebook, or Facebook moving to Instagram, or Instagram moving to TikTok or whatever. Right. So I think it felt like we were moving to something new anyway. Right. And it just may be like, hey, if somebody had the idea or has been thinking about this, like a kind of a different version of the public square that provides discovery and the ability to communicate, but it doesn't have some of the negative stuff. And I'm not saying that's an easy problem, nor do I say I know what it is, but like, there's just a nice place. Now would be the moment to go try it. Like to be like,
Sure.
oh, this is the way
Yeah,
I think we should do it. And if you did it, like you're almost given this compelling event. Now everyone's re-examining it versus like having to wait for Twitter to just slowly die off.
See,
like
this-
MySpace, right?
This is another example of like the to try to give it another name, like the jerk boundaries, like the ad hominem like tax that you have. Like if someone crosses the line of like jerkitude, right, then all of a sudden you got all this stuff to worry about. Whereas like previously, no one was like, oh yeah, we'll hang out here, it's great, we love it. And then all of a sudden, like just this line gets crossed, and now it's a big problem, right? So you can kind of feed that into your model to figure that out. That, I guess you could use that positively. You could be like, if we'd really like to end of life this product, but I don't know if people are going to let us. You could just be like, well, we could let Gerald out of the box. And see
We
what-
can
see
let
what
Elon
happens.
manage it.
And see what happens.
To that point, we'll see what happens tomorrow. Maybe in the next fortnight.
It's the best soap opera on Twitter.
It is.
Yeah.
I would say it is just compelling. The Palace intrigue is compelling to watch. If it's entertaining, if it is not healthy, it's still entertaining, I guess.
And then also I mean maybe they already have this, but there should be just like like a managed Mastodon thing. That would be easy.
I'm telling you, that's, if not Amazon, somebody has to offer that, because it's money there on the table.
Yeah. Well, so you got that going on. Well,
Got to
do
shoot
we
your
have
shot.
any bureaucracy this week, Brandon?
No major bureaucracy. I would just like to let everybody know, if you'd like a sticker, simply email your postal address to stickers@softwaredefinedtalk.com, and I will be happy to send you a sticker anywhere in the world. Of course, if you'd like to see more of us or hear more of us, you should watch us on the YouTube channel, so you can subscribe. The link will be in the show notes. And then just one thing I thought I'd grab from the Slack this week. Some people were asking, like, what's a replacement for Apple Podcasts? And I think a lot of us use Overcast. So we mentioned Marco Arnett, I think, at the top, or maybe in the pre-show. So if you're interested in another podcast player, if you're ready to leave the defaults lifestyle, I like Overcast. I use it quite a bit. It's got it's a little bit utilitarian, but I think it's pretty good. So if you want to try something new, try Overcast. It's probably beyond Apple Podcasts. It's the second most popular podcast player for our listeners. So check it out. It's recommended by the Slack users.
That's a good example, going back to our Outlook and Zmail conversation, right? Even in the rarefied world of people who would listen to this podcast, like tech people, still the default thing of Apple Podcasts is the leader in clients. Although I have to say, compared to other podcasts, Overcast is very high for our listenership. But it's just like, it's you use the app in front of you is what you end up doing, especially if you have to install another one. But yeah, it's a good podcast, listener. I use it. Well, there's several conferences coming up. There's I guess, hopefully you enjoyed All Days DevOps, which was last week on November 10th. And then I spent some time today submitting to a lot of different conference talks, conferences. And it's always a difficulty finding them. So I just kind of I found out here's a pro tip for people who submit to talks. If you log into Sessionize or Sessionizer, I forget, but if you submit to conference talks, you know what I'm talking about. There's some option that's just like open CFPs that you can go look at, and there's tons of them in there, all over the place. And the great thing about Sessionize, maybe they should sponsor our podcast, is that you can just say submit a past talk, and then you're done. And also, I'd like to know whatever, but like every now and then I submit to a DevOps conference. And they've got a good case study. This might be a good lightning case for a DevOps conference. They've got a good case study in UX design where you submit a talk and then it lists in your dashboard that you've submitted it. And there's an error message that always displays right after you submit the talk. And it says, don't forget to click submit to finalize your submission. And I feel like there had to have been a meeting where someone was like, Hey everyone, this has been a great 3-hour conversation that we've had. I like the solution we've come up with. Let's make sure to capture those, take a picture of those sticky notes we have on the board. But has anyone ever, I know I had to go have a bathroom break there for a while, but did anyone suggest that maybe when you click the submit button on the original thing, you just submit the talk and they don't have to click it when they come back to this dashboard, so you don't have to give them that warning message? So, there's that. But anyways, if anyone knows conferences to submit talks to, that would be great. I'm always looking for some. Also, there's that conference coming up in Texas, January 15th and 18th. And you can get 5% off, which will buy you a lot of tacos if you use the code SDT when you register. And then there's the Cloud Native Security Con North America in Seattle, February 1st and 2nd. All sorts of other conferences that will start trickling in there. If you have a conference you think people would like to hear about, you can join our Slack if you go to softwaredefinedtalk.com/Slack or click on the Slack link, and you could figure out which channel to use and come suggest one. That'd be cool. Speaking of, what's your recommendation this week, Brandon?
My recommendation is another HBO show. I guess I've been working my way through them. The White Lotus, so season 2 is out. So this is about, basically a group of people go to a resort and lots of crazy things happen. So season 1 was good. Season 2, sort of a different cast. It was like a little bit of a slow start, but I've gotten into it. So if you're looking for something to watch, check out The White Lotus.
Yourself, Matt Ray? What do you have to recommend?
Something I've recommended before, but all this talk about Mastodon and Twitter usage has, I've pinged the Tapbot folks several times, asking them to work on a Mastodon client. So Tweetbot is by far the best Twitter client. Definitely worth paying for. Gives you a lot of filtering options and whatnot. So Tweetbot for macOS is my choice. Keep the Twitter off the phone. It's too addictive, but Tweetbot.
I used to use that. That was fun. And then they changed the API at some point, and it had something that I didn't like.
They broke it and it got fixed. So
okay.
Yeah, Tweetbot is pretty.
That's one of those apps that like I reinstall every now and then, and because I bought it like 15 years ago, I can just I don't have to buy it again, which is good for them.
There might have been a paid upgrade in there somewhere, but yeah, it's just the filtering alone makes it worthwhile. Yeah.
Well, my recommendation, I know I'm this is our social media episode. I'm a little late to this, but I recently rediscovered the old bandcamp.com. Which is kind of fun. And there's 2 reasons why I recommend it. One, because it's very clean. And there's not a lot of jazz going on there.
Well, there is jazz.
No pun intended. Not a lot of weird stuff going on there. But then 2, there's also a lot of like not obscure music. But I found, I do this little newsletter, and I like to put little music things in there every now and then. The embeds that you get from Bandcamp are the best. They're not like gigantic or big. They're just this little thin strip. And what they do is you click on the play button and they play the music. And so it's like perfect software. It does exactly what you want. So, and also you can find like weird, obscure stuff in there, which I think is nice. Good old bandcamp.com. Check that out. And you can download MP3s. Do you still organize your MP3 files, Matt Ray?
Kinda. I've got a few gigabytes of unfiltered stuff, but
I here's a recommendation that I want is I would like some pieces of software that will, if I point it at like a bunch of old hard drives, will like suck out all the MP3s and organize them in a Matt Ray approved directory structure.
Oh, Cote.
and do deduplication
I've started
and all
writing
of that.
app. I've started writing that app. It's taking a while.
Because I have like, I don't know, 5, 6, 30 hard drives from the past 30 years.
Yep.
That have lots of
I've started
MP3s.
that app. It is a gargantuan task.
And so I just because what you can do with the Photos app is you can basically just like import a hard drive and it'll just find everything. And nowadays the deduplication is pretty good. And so everything kind of works out. But I don't want to point my Apple Music thing at a hard drive. I have. Because boy, the way Apple Music handles MP3s is just like they're kind of fucked in the head over there. But that's fine. Well, if you've enjoyed the show and you want to dig into more things, there's several things we didn't talk about. You could join the Slack channel. Click on to check out our recommendations if you forgot them. You can go to softwaredefinedtalk.com/387, which you'll find this episode, and then you can see everything else that's there. And hopefully. You've been following my advice and subscribing to this podcast, even if you don't use Overcast. In whatever podcast downloader you have, maybe you have purchased a closet full of Raspberry Pis and you've downloaded some sort of Go, Rust, or Python library for RSS downloading and put it on a cron job that just subscribes to our podcast feed and downloads it every hour or so. And maybe every hour would be bad. I don't know if Dan Benjamin's going to send us a bill for that if there's too many closets. But, so maybe half a closet. You could set that up. And with that, we'll see everyone next time. Bye-bye.
All right, good episode. Now I have a question on the music. I feel like I don't want to ask it because we're running long. So my question is simply this. It's like, okay, like everyone, you had the music you ripped and then the music maybe you bought pre-Apple subscriptions to music. So I have all of this music and I've just been rolling it over to like new Macs and new phones. And it's like, I think it's like 30 gigs, but I really never knowingly use it. I just kind of play what's in Apple Music. But I have this, this like, I don't know, this weird, I guess it's almost like a digital hoarding thing. It's like, I can't just delete it. I can't just let all the MP3s go. But like with my son and like this whole new generation, like they don't care. They don't even have any of this. They just listen to like what's on Spotify or Apple Music. Right, so my question is like, has someone figured this out? Do you just like delete it from your Apple Music library, or do you just back it up, or do you just
back it up? You carry it from laptop
like
to
this
laptop.
Would be at my funeral. Like Cote was saying, is like I'm still gonna have like on like 50 years from now, I'm gonna be like, no, keep those MP3s that I bought. Like that's my DRM. Like don't let it go.
They buried him with his backup drives.
Like what? Like what should I? So it looks like Brian says he left his behind. So maybe I'm gonna need like an intervention. Like maybe that's a poll. It's like, what did you leave your music behind, or did you do so? I guess maybe if I just had like some kind of good backup. Like I did this with old email too, like email that I never will need again. I'm like, I just like archive it in like a place on the hard drive. And every once in a while I'll be like, what is that file? What are those files? I don't need it. But like, oh no, that's my old email from 2003 that I definitely will never read again.
Yeah. See that was the another thing about the whole Twitter thing. I think a lot is just like, I'm like, I got all those followers, help me build this career and do all this stuff. And then I think like, well, what if it just went away tomorrow? And then I think, I think things would be pretty much the same for me. It'd be okay. However, maybe that is like a social media privilege position, right? Where like,
oh sure,
I no longer really need to build up all of this stuff. But I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Like it's definitely the one thing is like, man, it does seem like a miserable environment to be working in. Like I don't know,
no doubt.
To have your employment and you're like just all the normal stuff, even if you're in a good position, like your benefits, your employment, all that wrapped up, and like going to work every day, reading Twitter. I was like, God, that would be incredibly stressful. I just be like, oh. I don't know. So that's those are the people I feel like are in the dilemma. Maybe the people that are just trying to do their job and they're not like, don't necessarily want to take on the risk of just leaving in the middle of a recession. It's like, I don't know what I would do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So-
Well, can you enroll me in the alpha testing for your music finding service, Matt Ray?
I feel like Matt
Go-
Ray's been right.
Do I need to
So
do I need to star something in GitHub?
I've started this application to like literally go through and parse old sets of MP3s and then dump them into a new folder structure, properly tagged and identified and
yes.
stuff. And it's one of those like wide and deep problems that
Well,
every time I kind of start on it, I'm like, why am I doing this?
I have an easy project that's similar, just kind of like training, right? Like you know how like Batman will throw rubber tires around to kind of simulate fighting villains. It's kind of like this is like a rubber tire. Like so, if you download all of your Flickr pictures, right? It downloads a picture, and then it downloads a text file next to the picture that has all the meta information in the text file. And then the dates are all screwed up on your pictures. So you need some kind of magic Matt Ray script that will just open up all of those pictures and then open up the text file and write that into the ID3 and then set the file date correctly and everything.
Yeah.
You should do that.
I'll do that next.
It's like 15 minutes.
after
Right?
I finish
do that, Matt.
MP3s.
Do you need me to ship you a sleeping bag so you can sleep under your desk? Are you gonna? I'm gonna need you to be hardcore about this, Matt
You
Ray.
should be hardcore.
No.
You should opt
should be
in, Matt. We
hardcore.
need you to opt in to being hardcore.
Yeah, I'm about to send an email that's gonna have a link in it. You click the link or don't click the link,
No,
and you get. You know how much severance you're gonna get?
Unsubscribe.
0.
exactly.
Unsubscribe. Oh, I couldn't get the email. I'm sorry. If you don't open the email, you can't not click on it.
All right. Well, I want to thank all of the hardcore listeners for opting in to be part of the stream. So appreciate everyone that made it. It's always good. We even had some people from YouTube. I finally logged into the YouTube so I could at least sort of moderate, or at least try to kick some people out. So hopefully when we see the bots, we'll get it figured out. So
It seems like as soon as the channel started, they posted.
yeah,
And
so I
then,
think the
yeah.
key is like having this open before before we start the channel, which is probably my fault. So, but nonetheless, we'll make it better. It's getting better every time. So, all right. So to all the streamers, we'll be back probably next week about this time. So hopefully you can join us then.
Yep.